Michigan is averaging 167.8 yards rushing per game. Nebraska's defense is holding opponents to 46.3 yards per game. Will Michigan rush for 100 yards against Nebraska this weekend? That's your question of the week, and we'll get to that later. Welcome, everybody, to this week's preview episode. This Saturday, we have a 3:30 kickoff in Lincoln, Nebraska. The 4-0, number 2 ranked Michigan Wolverines are 17-point favorites on the road against Nebraska, who has 2 wins and 2 losses on the season. The over-under is 39.5, and the game will be airing on Fox. So as I go over some information here, I'm going to be putting graphics on to do stat comparisons for conference rankings for both teams. So Nebraska is 2-2, but this team could easily be 3-1 as they had a close game at the beginning of the season against Minnesota. If they had started Harburg instead of Sims, that game could have ended differently, or if they didn't have so many turnovers. But an extra win against a Minnesota team who just let Northwestern come back last week and win in overtime isn't overly impressive, but 3-1 does look better than 2-2. Nebraska was suffering a quarterback crisis at the beginning of the season when they were first starting with quarterback Sims. He was the one who started the first 2 games, and he had 4 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles during that time. Once Matt Rule put in Harburg, he really didn't look back. Harburg has a completion percentage of 51.1% with 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and is only averaging 69.5 yards per game. So he also makes up for that with the rushing attack, where he has 2 touchdowns and is averaging 68 yards per game. The other main point of attack for the rushing offense is Anthony Grant. He has stepped up since their sophomore running back went down with injury. Grant has 2 touchdowns on the season as well and averages 69.3 yards per game. Nebraska's goal offensively is to run the ball. This is what they're good at. This is where they found their success. So if they're not able to do this, it will be a tough battle for them. In their losses, Nebraska is averaging 201.5 yards per game, while in their wins, they're able to average 268 yards per game. The Nebraska offense moves with the running game. If that is not efficient for them, then the offense really might fall apart. It's key in their scoring as well, as they are averaging 3 touchdowns per game rushing in their wins, while in their losses, they've only averaged 0.5 rushing touchdowns per game. One extra thing that the Michigan defense will need to be mindful of is that they do utilize the option quite a bit. Nebraska's goal defensively, this is going to come across as really basic, but they do want to continue their dominance, shutting down the run offense, but they also want to be mindful of the pass offense as well. I know that's what everybody wants to do, but when they let opponents be too successful through the air, that is when they find themselves falling behind in games. When Nebraska has lost, they are allowing just under 300 yards passing on average per game, while when they're winning, just above 200 yards on average per game. One of the easiest indicators of success in a game and the likelihood of winning a game is turnover margin. And for Nebraska, that was really rough, especially the first 2 weeks for them. In their losses, Nebraska's averaging -3 in the turnover margin, while on the other side, in their wins, they're averaging plus 0.5 in the turnover margin. So it's easy to say when Nebraska doesn't take care of the ball, their chances of winning drop significantly. Defensively, Nebraska has been able to get to the quarterback with quarterback hurries and sacks. They actually lead the Big Ten in sacks per game. The thing about that, however, is that the Nebraska defense has not gone up against arguably the best offensive line in college football. So we'll see how well they fare this weekend. Ironically enough, though, when Nebraska has their most success with getting sacks in a game, those have wound up being the games that they have lost. They've been averaging 5.5 sacks per loss, while in wins, they've only been averaging 1.5 sacks. While the atmosphere in Lincoln can be electric, I don't think it's going to be much of a factor this Saturday. There are plenty of members on this team that were part of the program in 2021 when Michigan went to Nebraska and actually was trailing in the fourth quarter. These Michigan Wolverines mean business, and this is a business trip for them. They want to go out and take care of their job, and they want to prove to the rest of the conference that they are as good, if not better, than last year. So what should we expect from Michigan? Honestly, I expect the same thing we've seen before with the slow, methodical game that is Michigan football. It works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I do expect McCarthy, along with Wilson, of course, and Loveland and Johnson, to do their part and be key factors in attacking a weak Husker secondary. Of course, there will still be plenty for Corman Edwards to do on the ground. That does bring us to the interesting question of, will Michigan rush for over 100 yards against Nebraska this weekend? Michigan has been known for their offensive line, especially the last two seasons. So will they be able to push around the Cornhuskers enough to allow running backs such as Corman Edwards to be able to rack up rushing yards and break 100 for the day? Honestly, between Michigan's conditioning and their slow, drawn-out drives, I believe that by the fourth quarter, Nebraska will be pretty exhausted, and the offensive line will be able to push them around, allowing the running game to be able to rack up enough yards to hit the three figures. I fully expect that to be Michigan's plan as they're trying to bleed the clock and put the game away. So where does that leave us for a score prediction? I'm not expecting anything fancy, as we've already seen. Michigan is hanging out there right in the low 30s for scoring each week. So I anticipate going into halftime that Michigan might put up 17 points, Nebraska 3. And then in the second half, Michigan is just going to slowly add to their lead while limiting Nebraska on offense as well. I have down a final score of Michigan 30, Nebraska 10, as the Michigan Wolverines get their first road win of the season. All right, well, each week reveals to us something new with this Michigan team, and so I'm excited for this Saturday. You all, of course, will be able to catch us after the game for the review episode. But until that comes around, I hope you get to enjoy your Saturday and enjoy all the college football. But of course, as always, go blue.